Warren stares at the roof of his makeshift tent. He knows he has to get up. The call of nature is too much. He needs to pee. The warmth of his sleeping bag keeps him there for a moment longer. Eventually, he relents. Barefoot, he steps out of the tent, the cool rocks biting into his skin with each step. He wants to get far from the creek that trickles by his campsite, keeping the water pure and untouched. He eyes the granite bank nearby, spotting a fissure that might give him a solid handhold. He takes a breath, bracing himself as he begins to climb. Suddenly, two piercing sounds shatter the stillness of the Australian night. The first, a massive boulder tumbling loose, its echo booming against the rocks. Next, the sickening crack of Warren's pelvis as the boulder slams down, pinning him to the earth. Pain erupts in his body, crippling him, but the agony is only just starting for Warren. Hinchinbrook Island, Australia, April 1997. 32-year-old Warren Macdonald walks along the rugged but breathtaking coastline of Hinchinbrook Island. The remote island, accessible by ferry once a day, is popular with backpackers for its untamed, lush rainforests and scenic beaches. For the past 2 days, Warren's been immersed in the island's wilderness, with long hikes by day and nights spent under the stars. On the third day, Warren arrives to Little Ramsey Bay campsite. There, he meets Geert van Kolen, a Dutch artist, sitting naked on the sand except for a headband. Geert is completely absorbed, sketching the ocean scene before him. Warren and Geert hit it off. Geert asks Warren and another backpacker if they want to hike to the island's highest peak, Mount Bowen. There they can gaze on the incredible views of the island and beyond. The other hiker declines, but Warren agrees. Wednesday, April 9th, 7:30 a.m. Geert and Warren set out for Mount Bowen early the next morning. The hike should take 6 to 7 hours, but soon the terrain turns treacherous. The faintly marked path winds along a rocky creek bed, making each step a challenge. Geert struggles, but Warren, being very fit, nimbly hops from one slippery rock to the next. They press on for hours, pausing only to grab a quick lunch and cool off beneath a waterfall. By late afternoon, they expect to be nearing the summit, but Mount Bowen's peak still looms far above them. That evening, Warren and Geert set up camp on a large flat rock beside a shallow creek. Over dinner, they agree to turn back in the morning. Neither has enough time left on their trekking permits to push toward the peak. The pair settle down to sleep, but soon Warren awakens. He needs the toilet, so he clambers out of his sleeping bag. The bush surrounding the camp is thick and coarse, so Warren crosses the creek and heads for higher ground. He scrambles up the bank, searching for handholds. Suddenly, he looks up. A refrigerator-sized rock tumbles out of the darkness, heading straight for him. The rock slams Warren back down into the creek, pinning his legs and shattering his pelvis. Geert is jolted awake by Warren's agonized screams, shattering the tranquility of the night. Still half asleep, he stumbles toward the sound, sweeping his flashlight over the ground in a frantic search. When the beam lands on Warren, Geert's stomach drops. Warren is trapped on the creek bed, a massive boulder crushing him. Both men desperately press against the boulder, straining to shift its weight, but it doesn't budge. After several minutes of futile effort, Warren urges Geert to find a branch to use as a makeshift lever. Just as Geert starts searching, a light drizzle begins to fall, soaking the rocks and making their task feel even more impossible. Warren waits in the dark, his eyes fixed on the narrow beam of Geert's flashlight as he fights to control his breathing and stay calm. Branch after branch snaps under the weight of the boulder. At one point, they manage to shift the rock slightly, but that only causes it to further settle on Warren's upper thighs. Each attempt to move the boulder grinds it deeper into Warren's legs, sending fresh waves of pain through his body. The rain turns into a downpour, and they have a new worry. The creek is rising. Water already laps at Warren's waist, turning their struggle into a race against time. If they don't free him soon, he could drown. Geert, fearing the cold will worsen Warren's chances, hurries to fetch a jacket, which Warren fumbles to pull on with numb fingers. Desperately, he rubs his hands together, trying to keep them warm. Realizing that none of the dead branches are strong enough, Geert uses his Swiss Army knife to saw down a green sapling. In his haste, he accidentally slices his fingers. He tries to use the sapling as a lever, but it fails too. For nearly 4 hours, they struggle to move the rock off of Warren. With exhaustion settling in, Warren utters the unspoken fear that they have been avoiding. Geert has to leave him and hike down the mountain for help. At first, Geert protests, unwilling to abandon his friend, but he knows it's their only chance. With a heavy heart, Geert reluctantly agrees. Hiking down the mountain in the dark is too risky, so they decide Geert will leave in the morning. It'll take him 8 hours to reach the campsite at Little Ramsey Bay. If they're lucky, Geert might meet other hikers who can raise the alarm and help free Warren. But all they can do now is wait until first light. Geert lies down and tries to rest, but he can't. He is racked by guilt and worry. Periodically, he calls out to Warren to make sure he's still alive. The rain eases and the danger of rising water lessens, though it doesn't disappear entirely. Warren can still hear the torrent of rushing water upstream. Thursday, April 10th, dawn. As dawn breaks, Geert starts to pack up his and Warren's gear. In 3 plastic bags, he puts a torch, clothing, insect repellent, a toothbrush and toothpaste, a first aid kit, food, a plastic mug, a blue tarp, and Warren's diary with a pen. He places the bags on the boulder within Warren's reach. Geert threads a cord through the bags and ties it around Warren's neck. If the water rises, the provisions won't be swept away. Geert piles up rocks and lays his camping mattress over them, creating an improvised backrest for Warren. He also builds a small retaining wall of rocks on Warren's side to offer some protection against rising water. The goodbye is awkward. Warren reassures him he can last the night alone, but not much longer than that. He is counting on Geert. Geert kisses his new friend on the forehead, puts on his pack, and leaves. Geert spends the entire day hiking down the mountain. The going is tough. He slips and falls on the steep, slippery descent. The plastic raincoat he's wearing makes him sweat, forcing him to take frequent water breaks. However, it offers some protection from the sharp leaves and thorns that line the path. In his pack, Geert carries Warren's address book, carefully wrapped in plastic. Before he left, Warren asked him to contact his father if he didn't make it. Rain falls intermittently, but Geert pushes on. When the creek becomes too dangerous to walk in, he moves through the dense rainforest, forcing his way through the brush and undergrowth. Using his Swiss Army knife, he hacks at the vines and branches blocking his path. Whenever Geert feels like he can't go on, he glances down at the purple hiking socks he put on before leaving. Warren's socks. They lift his spirits, a reminder of what's at stake. As he continues his descent, Geert stumbles into a nest of stinging green tree ants. The ants instantly swarm under his raincoat and shirt, biting and ripping at his skin. Desperate, Geert drops his pack and dives into the nearby rock pool to wash them off. Back at the creek, Warren is alone, with nothing but pain and his thoughts. He rides an emotional roller coaster, swinging between misery and hope. One moment he believes Geert will make it, find help and he'll be okay. The next he worries he'll lose a leg, or worse, die alone. Warren uses the mug to drink directly from the water around him. Even though he doesn't feel like eating, he snacks to keep his energy up. Warren tries to write in his diary about what's happening to him, but it only makes the reality of the situation worse. Later, he notices a patch of water near his right foot, swirling red with blood. He realizes he hasn't felt his foot since the accident, and a wave of dread washes over him as he looks down. A yabby, a freshwater crayfish, is nibbling on his foot. Warren grabs a stick, weakly swatting at the crustacean. With steady patience and effort, he manages to spear it. Around 4:30 p.m., Geert arrives at the Little Ramsey Bay campsite. It took Warren and Geert about 8.5 hours to get to their campsite on Mount Bowen. The return journey took about 11 hours. Geert tosses down his pack, peels off his ripped and tattered clothes, and walks straight into the ocean. The salt stings his scrapes, but the cool water is a relief, easing his battered body. Afterward, he examines his bruises and carefully bandages the worst wounds. He tries to eat, but exhaustion overwhelms him, and he ends up vomiting. Using dried palm leaves and driftwood, Geert builds a fire, hoping its smoke might attract attention. He sets up camp for the night, knowing there is no point going any further. The ferry won't arrive until tomorrow. Now all he can do is keep the fire alive and wait, hoping help isn't far away. Geert tries to sleep, but he is restless and worried. Warren is lost in thought when he suddenly feels a sharp, stinging pain in his groin. He looks down to see a swarm of angry ants are crawling all over him. The dislodged boulder smashed into their nest, and now they're on a march for a new one. Warren fumbles in his first aid kit and finds some repellent, frantically rubbing on much of his skin as he can reach. Time loses all meaning for him. He can't see his lower left leg and foot, but he can still feel them. He hasn't had any sensation in his right leg and foot since the accident. His right foot has turned gray and is developing green spots. He weeps, fearing he'll lose his leg. Exhausted, Warren manages to sleep in short bursts. His dreams are descended into surrealism, and he begins to hallucinate. Friday, April 11th, 5:30 a.m. Geert wakes up still exhausted. He takes a dip in the ocean, then painfully packs up his camp. After a few hours of walking, he arrives at the jetty just around 10 a.m. The ferry hasn't arrived yet, and 2 backpackers from Queensland are waiting. Geert hoarsely recounts Warren's situation to them. The hikers help him build a bonfire on the beach. They deliberately toss plastic into the flames to make thick black smoke. They also write an SOS message in big letters in the sand. When it arrives and the passengers disembark, the ferry operator quickly takes Geert out to the open water. It's the only place his radio signal is strong enough for a mayday call. But the signal fails. For the next half hour, they navigate through the mangroves, eventually finding an old crab fisherman who has a more powerful radio. After several attempts, the fisherman gets through, reaching the Hinchinbrook Resort, a barrier reef retreat nearby. The resort relays an emergency call to the Queensland Rescue Helicopter Base in Cairns, where the crew leaps into action. At around 2:30 p.m., the ferry operator leaves Geert on the beach to wait, alone and anxious. Hours pass by until around 4:30 p.m., Geert spots a helicopter in the distance, heading toward Mount Bowen. He watches as it circles the mountain before it descends to the beach to pick him up. Geert directs them to the area where Warren is located. For several minutes, everyone aboard the helicopter scans the green canopy until one of the crew spots a blue tarp being waved. Warren is still alive, barely. The crew notes the coordinates of Warren's location before the helicopter turns back, dropping Geert off at Ramsey Bay. It then heads to the mainland to refuel and gather supplies for the rescue. Crewman Daniel Portefeuille realizes they'll need heavy hydraulic lifting equipment to free Warren from the boulder. He contacts the local airport fire department, who immediately dispatches an officer with the necessary tools. About 30 minutes later, the helicopter returns fully equipped, and Warren's rescue begins in earnest. Rescue crew members rappel down from the helicopter and hike to Warren to assess the situation. Dr. Chip Jaffers is surprised to find Warren still alive, let alone lucid and able to answer questions. He quickly takes Warren's pulse, administers morphine, and hooks him up to an IV. The helicopter makes several trips to move rescuers and equipment to Warren's location. It takes around 2.5 hours for the rescuers to set up hydraulic lifting equipment and move the rock off of Warren. Throughout this time, he fades in and out of consciousness. Just before they lift the rock, Dr. Jaffers gives Warren a shot of adrenaline to get his heart racing. Toxins and potassium that have built up from the necrotic tissue in Warren's legs are about to flood the rest of his body once the pressure is relieved. Warren is secured in the helicopter and airlifted to the mainland. He arrives at a hospital in Cairns at 8:39 p.m. Friday. The team of doctors and nurses awaits him. He's in critical condition, suffering from shock, and his legs have been without circulation for nearly 48 hours. Surgeon Bill Clark explains that Warren's legs are damaged beyond repair. They are going to have to be amputated. It's his professional opinion that Warren will not survive the night if they don't remove the necrotic tissue as soon as possible. Warren is in despair, but gives his assent for the operation. By 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, both of Warren's legs have been amputated at mid-thigh. Several months and multiple surgeries later, Warren recovers. The loss of his legs is hard to bear, but he decides that the amputation will not stop his active lifestyle. 10 months after the accident, Warren climbs Tasmania's Cradle Mountain using a modified wheelchair and the seat of his pants. A year after conquering Cradle Mountain, he climbs Federation Peak, also in Tasmania. In February 2003, Warren becomes the first double above-knee amputee to summit Africa's tallest peak, Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, using specialized climbing prosthesis. Warren is now a motivational speaker and explorer. He and Geert remain close friends, their lifelong bond forged in adversity. They periodically meet up to explore the great outdoors together. What would you have done if you were in Warren's situation? Got any other incredible survival stories? Let us know in the comments. Now go watch I Was Trapped in a Canyon for 127 hours, or click on this video instead.